Back
Make
on,
it so.
meanwhile, back on what you were talking about with using Perplexity or Google to get answers and to do that stuff in a browser. If you're like me and you pay a whopping $20 a year for Google One, which I use for this 100 gig of additional space, you get unlimited voice or chat or tech or email support from Google on anything Google related. So you
Oh,
can
Hmm.
call the number, and within under 5 minutes, you'll get a Google expert who will answer your Google questions, which
Yes,
is
I've used
not
that
a.
before. That's
Mhm.
really good.
well, I'm paying for Google One, so I'll have to realize that I actually have an expert there, and I hope they just don't call some guy who's a level six uh,
Yeah, you
guy
can
who lives next door or something.
you can inside the Google One app, you can initiate a tech support call
Uh-huh.
if
Huh.
you're logged into your phone with an account that has, at least that $20 plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed they have added, if you go to the 2 gig plan, they include the first 6 months at least of the AI stuff.
Oh, so they're bundling it together to give you more features.
Yeah, but what's weird about it, it says new features. Then if you read down, it's for 6 months, and after that it goes to 20 a month for that add-on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Intelligent costs. Yes. Interesting.
Yeah, but it's a way to do that there. But the eSIM
See,
worked fairly well. The only spottiness is when you're in Ukraine, and you're in rural areas. It's hard. So you're driving along and you get a signal, and then you go another kilometer, you don't have a signal. Then you go another few kilometers, you got another signal back, and so it gets a bit spotty there. But I wasn't expecting a lot of that in Ukraine, especially considering I wasn't in a big city like Kyiv.
Well, you have to realize that occasionally overnight they may lose a cell site or two when something comes in from Russia.
Yeah, yeah. It was the areas we were in were areas that were taken over by Russia and Ukraine recaptured. So there are buildings with bullet holes through them and walls missing and tarps for roofs. And the day after we left, that area was bombed again by Russia.
Oh, wow.
So it's sketchy in some of the areas there. It definitely is.
Well, I was glad to see you posting on Facebook that you were already on your way home when I heard that they were starting to maybe use ICBMs.
Well, the Russians aren't going to use ICBMs in the areas that I was in. They're
Yeah.
smaller towns, and so there's no great reason to do that. Plus, Russia's used up most of their main powerful missiles. That's why they're doing more drone stuff. They don't
Uh-huh.
have a lot of missiles left to use. They're going to use those on specific targets, like
And
they're doing what they try.
I heard they're also using North Koreans.
Yeah, there's 10,000. That's why Biden is allowed them to use longer range missiles because they're bringing in 10,000 North Korean troops. Not that those guys are particularly well trained either, but they're bringing those guys in
Yeah,
as
give
well.
them an internet connection and a web browser, and they'll be happy. They'll go away.
I mean, the sad thing is the churches that we were in, and we stayed in like bunks in churches.
Mhm.
The places we were, it's mostly older people that are left. The
Mhm.
younger people with kids have moved out of that area for safety, the younger guys have been called up for service. So you'd go into churches and it would be mainly the older women that are behind, that are left behind there, and some older men. But that's, you don't see much other than that in most of those communities now.
Well, I like the older people
Um,
that want to live around Chernobyl.
well, it's these people. That's their home, and it's been their home for most of their, for either all or most of their lives. And not only that, these older folks are. It's not easy for them to pack up and move somewhere else. So they're doing the best they can, but it's not fun. And the Russians, I started to say, are doing the same thing they did last year. They try to knock out the power so there's no heat
Mm-hmm.
for these people. That's why they're doing it. It's the same thing they did last year. They're trying to knock out power systems. It's nasty. I mean, it violates the Geneva Convention. We all know that, but the Russians don't care. I
Yep.
mean, they morality isn't part of their equation. So they do the same thing. They target civilians and try to knock out at their power in the winter. It's a sad. It really is a sad situation. So we were there bringing 500 pounds of knit goods. For those who aren't on Facebook and don't know, there's a knitting alliance of churches throughout the U.S., and they're all amassed. They're put into the shrink plastic bags where you suck the air out, and those are combined in big duffel bags. And we brought a bunch of duffel bags of knit goods for the winter for these women and children.
Interesting.
And we also had 250 boxes of food, 320 loaves of bread, and two generators.
And they
Mm.
would probably love to have all of that stuff.
It helps. I mean, it when, as I said, it's getting colder, and it helps.
You went to
Um,
specifically a couple towns or something that were in this area?
we went to five different communities. Generally, we were greeted by the mayor of the town, and had a service in a church in each town, usually with hymns, and we each got up and to speak for a couple minutes. One of the guys was a long talker. It's the same weird speech every time, and I'm me, so I came up with a different thing every time because I hate repeating myself. Um, but it helps them in that somebody from the outside world has come. I
Mhm.
mean, the knit goods and the food and the bread and stuff is good. The being there coming from America, that there are still people thinking about them, is the most important part of it. It really is. They
What
see us up there, the three of us, and that we cared to come from America to Ukraine, um, is meaningful for them. I mean, we get hugs and kisses uh, on the cheek, from these
How
from
many do
these
you have
folks.
living in your garage now?
I can barely get my car in my garage, but but
Ed,
anyway,
what kind of issues do you have, like going through customs or the Ukrainian military to move around, like that kind of stuff?
it's a good question. There are checkpoints at various places where the military has put in the road with blocking things. So, and then they check you and your vehicle. Um, Bill, who runs these groups, brings these large baggies of packs of cigarettes and candy and stuff as bribes for these people at checkpoints.
Sounds like
Um,
the standard way of getting through a checkpoint in most of the world.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it generally works fine to get through, and
Cash works
they
too.
tend to move fast. I mean, even the borders are fairly quick. Except the guy who stood up and does the long speeches was trying to make time with the woman working at the border. Um, and
Yeah.
and Bill and I are standing there just shaking our heads, going, seriously?
And I see you
We
got
don't.
back just in time for Amazon Black Friday week.
Yeah, yeah, I've looked at a few items. I've been looking at getting a Mac Air. And there are a few good deals right now. They're doing an M. I don't. You all probably heard. Apple has upped the base from 8 to 16. Finally, on these machines, which why it took them this long. They made a lot of money on the upgrades, is
Mhm.
really why. Because the retail partners of Apple happily sell the eights and
Mhm.
not the higher memory ones where you go to Apple usually to buy. Um, and they rarely discount the ones with 16 or more. And you probably also know Apple's machines are shared memory with the between the video and the system. So
Most
that
PCs do the same exact thing. Unless you got a discrete graphics
it,
processor, it is using shared memory because a discrete one has its own memory and they still will reserve some of your main memory in case there's a need for overflow.
Yeah. Well, that's
yeah,
why you get 32 gig on them.
which brings me to an actual tech question. Has anybody played with the difference? The new Intel machines are ARC instead of the older XE.
Hang on. Before we do something technical, I could we be starting the meeting and then do that?
Actually, we did, but
We did start it. It
Oh, you did
started.
start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, nobody
Yeah.
announced.
We're
Okay,
good. Go ahead.
so we're into technical questions.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So the new machines, there's two things interesting about them. One is their Ultra, the Intel processor, like i7 Ultra, i5 Ultra, which are using ARC graphics instead of the older XE, and have the AI engine stuff built into them
right.
as well. And I've seen those machines, and I wonder if anybody had played with any of them.
I have only heard one thing. ARC GPUs were discrete graphics cards. They were considered low end, and I think I remember reading they have abandoned those card on the market. So they probably just took the GPU, started putting it in some of these new processor chips, and supposedly for most people, it's not going to be bad. It's at least a medium level gaming graphics capability. It's not high end.
Yeah, no, that I know, and I'm not a gamer, so that wasn't particularly an issue to
Theoretically,
me.
it's a bump up from the old XE graphics controller. They've done this once in a blue moon. They upgrade the graphics processor, and they didn't have any, I guess, use for the ARC processor, so they included it in the new chips.
When about did that happen? Because I have an Intel Arc driver, but no separate Arc graphics as well. The Arc graphics are obviously built into the CPU.
Right. That's the
I
way it
when did
works.
that change? When did that change happen?
When they started creating the ultra processors. The ultra processor includes the ARC graphic processor, like he said, and the NPU. So if you want those, if you want the NPU, you got to get a machine with an Ultra processor. Uh, a Core processor, no longer Core I, is the standard chips we've been using, just upgraded to a new generation.
Yeah, but mine is Core I, and it uses an ARC driver.
It
I don't know
might.
what its hardware is.
I don't
The
know.
ARC, according to what I've seen here on the web, it was late 2023 into the Intel Core Ultra is when they brought in the ARC GPU and integrated it into the Ultra H and U series processors.
Hmm.
That's my understanding. And related to this, there's two series at the same time. There's already the Ultra 2,
Hmm.
which uses the 155 chip is in most of the Ultras, and the 200 series is in the Ultra 2 level, which are just Meteor Lake is their name for the whatever
Meteor
you
Lake,
call it name
yes,
of those.
code
And
name,
those are
yeah.
supposed to be a significant bit better than the current ultras, and they're due out beginning of next late this year, beginning of next year. Evidently, there's a couple Ultra 2s machines available now, but they're
Yeah,
not.
Meteor Lake, by the way, is just simply the code name for 14th gen.
Yeah, I don't know where they get the meteors in a lake, but
That
Yeah,
anyway.
those
Meteor
are
Lake is a
code names.
place. It's a place and it's a code name.
It's a code
And
How
name
about how about
for each generation.
Erie Lake for the generation that doesn't work?
Yeah.
yeah, but anyway, that is a general term for 14th gen. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No, no, I appreciate the info. No problem interrupting on that.
Yeah,
Any info helps.
I'm still trying to figure out the difference between ARC driver and ARC hardware because I'm pretty sure I don't have the ARC graphics hardware built in,
Well,
but
they maybe
there's a
just
driver.
giving you a driver that works better on what you do have installed versus a actual ARC hardware.
My graphics are Iris, Intel Iris.
Well, I know a virus. I've got a few machines on that, but it's also a case where they may have new drivers for Iris that
Yeah,
are labeled ARC. It may be a subset of the ARC that we're talking about in these
yeah,
Ultra chips.
yeah. I'm gonna see if I can get an explanation from them.
Good luck on that one. But I was, if you remember last time, I was thinking of getting a Copilot machine, one of the Intel ARM machines. But there are compatibility issues with stuff, and it seems the Ultras pretty much have the same benefit of battery life without the compatibility issues.
All you got to
I think
do
the
is
yeah,
hook it up to your electric car and use its battery.
yeah. I think the reason you have a driver is it's for compatibility so that you can have it support both the 11th gen graphics and also the Intel Iris Xe Max graphics.
Mine's 12th gen, but
Well,
I do have an 11th gen that is similar.
yeah, so it may be a compatibility issue, so there's a common interface, even though it might turn into processor instructions.
Okay. Arc Control does drivers. That's all about drivers.
Yeah,
And it applies minimum to 11th gen
yeah.
or an Intel Arc dedicated graphics card. It's either or from 11th
Hmm.
gen onward.
Probably just for compatibility, so there's a common interface, and they only develop that interface, and it figures out what you have in order to use it.
There must be some special features that have been implemented, but they're not officially segregated into a GPU.
Yeah, they may be interesting.
So that, yeah, it's interesting that at the Intel site Yeah, I do have an ARC driver, but not the ARC hardware, not the card.
No, not the card. Well,
So
it'll be
anyway,
interesting. Yes, Sid, you had another question?
Yeah, new question that I am an idiot about. So hopefully somebody can enlighten me. I have these kind of battery guys. It's green, which is why you're seeing it whited out a lot. Um, but these are Greenworks 40 40 volt 4 amp.
Uh-huh.
And there are a couple of Black Friday deals on Amazon for replacement of these that are much cheaper. And somebody commented that there's two kinds of battery things. This is an actual cheap Greenworks one, and then these really inexpensive ones. And they said the big difference is the really inexpensive ones, the battery drains over a few weeks if you just leave it sit. And the name brand has circuitry in it that it holds charge. So you don't have to worry about every few weeks charging it up.
Well, if you were a fan of the eco batteries, the ones that go into the big lawnmowers and such, they specifically say for long-term storage, the batteries will automatically self-discharge to 40% and hold it there rather than trying to keep a full charge on the battery, which encourages dendrite formation inside of the lithium batteries, which shortens the life. So if you're not using it actively, it will discharge in over a couple weeks to 40%. That may be what they're doing.
Oh, it's I was one of the ones I looked at was only $35 for one of these from a company, and it said in the little print at the bottom that you need to recharge it within 3 weeks, every 3 weeks. And
Yeah,
it will go down to zero if you just let it sit.
well, like I said, my daughter has both the snow thrower and the riding lawnmower, so she's got a bunch of these 8 and 12 ampere hour batteries that plug in to run this thing. I don't know what her lifetime is when she goes outside in this kind of temperature to try and collect leaves, because
Well,
you have like
hopefully,
half the capacity in this weather.
well, hopefully her lifetime is quite good. But you said you didn't know what her lifetime is
Yeah,
when she
her
went
battery's
outside.
lifetime. Yes, yes, should be better. Yes, but she decided she didn't want. The only thing she's got that's gasoline powered is an old shredder I got them, and they don't make too many shredders that are battery powered that can handle a 2-inch limb. Just
I
something about
made
power.
every year in the fall, I kept forgetting to use up the gas in the stupid snow blower. Last year, I set it outside and I let it run in the fall. So today, when I brought gas home and I filled it, it started on the first pull.
Yeah. If you drain it out and then run it until it stops, and then take the stuff that you drained out and put it into your gas tank, it'll work fine.
Yeah,
Or
there's no good. Wouldn't be able to do that. I just let it run till it used up what was in there.
the other thing I do is I put stable in my gas about this time on any gas I purchase, and that'll keep it good for a year. And I always, with any of my gasoline powered equipment that I have access to, the shutoff valve, I always shut off the valve and run out the gas in the carburetor. And that usually preserves the seals and the floats. So I have a generator that's 1998 vintage Coleman generator that still runs on the second pull. And my snow thrower starts up just as easily by pushing the button and boom, starts. And that's because every time I run it, I always, hit the shut off before I'm done while I'm trying to drag this thing back to the garage and let it use up some of its gas. and then why let it get all the gas out of the carburetor. If it's a dry carb, the needle doesn't get corroded. You don't have to worry about cleaning it out with carb cleaner, all that good stuff.
Yeah, speaking about having to stabilize gas, I have a plug-in hybrid, and it runs mostly in electric mode. And I have a similar issue with gasoline in a hybrid. If it's not gonna be used up, I use the stabilizer in there too. And I was wondering whether or not I'm actually doing myself any good.
They probably are. Depends on how much stabilizer you have to add for how many gallons, because usually it's an ounce for every 2.5 gallons.
Yeah,
So depending on how much you need, you have to add a fair amount. But
yeah,
what is it, 11-gallon gas tank, standard Prius?
something like that.
Yeah. Most of the time when I'm running my non-plug-in Prius, it's going to run the engine anyway in this colder weather, just so you have something for the heater to work with. So
Yeah,
it's using gas. It just doesn't use a lot of it.
yeah. Well, the gas does last a long time, and I was just saying that because it's similar to these other things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is there a way on those cars to say I want to use the gas engine?
Oh yes, you have three modes. You have
Yeah.
a power mode, which does not use the plug-in electric, and you have an eco mode, which favors the plug-in electric, and then you have some kind of a balanced mode.
Or you have electric only. For me, it only goes
Yeah.
to 10 miles an hour. For you, probably 35.
I haven't really tested it that much because if you get up to 35, you're not going to get a lot of miles.
No, you're not. I
Whereas
get I get about 2 miles, maybe. That would be pushing it, going downhill in all
I
electric mode.
mine with 6.4 kilowatts is able to go. I think it's something like 39 miles.
See, I'm on an original 2010 Prius battery.
Yeah,
It's got 97,000 miles on the odometer now. So, and it has a new inverter though.
yeah. 2020 Prius. I think it's around 39 miles that it can go on.
Yeah.
6.4 kilowatts.
Well, one
Somebody
of the
can correct my
differences.
math if they later on see this video and find out that I'm wrong.
No, you have a lithium battery. I have a nickel cadmium. That's one of the big differences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Something else about stable. I've seen two different versions. One stable 360, good for a year, but I've seen another version of stable that says if you use gas with ethanol in it, you should use that because it keeps the rubber components or something from corroding. Something, you know anything about that, Ed?
I wasn't aware because all of my gas has ethanol in it because I'm not going to Wisconsin to get gas. So yeah, if I mine is an old bottle of original stable that probably accommodated that. Now they took that substance out and made it a thing called Stable 360 for people to think they don't need it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some kind of other version for ethanol gas. I don't.
Yeah, there
Well,
are some stabilizers which specialize in that.
the question is whether or not it's needed with 10% or if you need more than that, if you're running E85 or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, the general advice online is for small engines or for storage, just try to find gas that doesn't have ethanol.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, but that's what some people are able to find.
Yeah. Well, if you like I said, if you go to someplace like outside of our collar counties, you can get it without any ethanol in it. But that's kind of rare. All I know is if I ever do get that kind of gas when I'm traveling to Florida or something,
Yeah,
I've noticed my gas mileage and my traverse goes up.
yeah. This
You've got
is
more
what,
energy on real gas on total gasoline versus ethanol. Yeah.
yeah, this is what a lot of people notice. At least
Yeah.
gallon for gallon.
The worst thing was on my 94 Astro because it liked the well, what was the chemical that was in there before that they went to ethanol? There was a octane booster that they used to use that was deemed a carcinogen, TB something. I can't remember it off the hand. I will recall it probably at night tonight about 3 a.m. But they used to put that into the shell, super shell, and that would work great in the Astro. And then we went to ethanol, and that my performance suffered with the ethanol in there because it really didn't like the ethanol.
Yeah. At some point, if we want to radically change subjects, I went online and looked to see if Macrame Reflect was having its Black Friday deals, and they're on.
Okay, so what's the best package to get?
Well, here's what I found. I Macrame Reflected is now up to version X, which is 10. I You can get for one computer, it's half off at $30 a year, $29.99. But if you go up to four computers, there's a 50% discount, and it's $60 for four computers, $59.99. So I don't know if that's exactly the same ratio, but it's at least half off.
And if you use that, it's supposed to get the nag messages off of Win 10 to go away that says you haven't backed up your computer.
That it will not do, because the backup in Win 10, in Win 11 and Win 10 is file backup to the cloud.
And it wants to do OneDrive. And I've had all kinds of fun trying to fully grok how OneDrive thinks it should work. I just fired up a Win 11 machine, and I happened to have OneDrive kick in automatically. And I'm thinking, what happened to, I ran a Zoom on there, and the Zoom puts it into the documents folder. Well, after I was done, it had already taken that Zoom folder and moved it to the cloud. Like, stop it. Quit moving my folders around. So I unlinked the PC, lost the Zoom folder, but I didn't need it. But I was trying to turn off where you go into the Zoom settings, not Zoom settings, the OneDrive settings. You see it has a couple of options. One of them is what folders it's going to be backing up. And there's some that may be partially grayed out. And you're wondering, why are they grayed out? Why can't I check them off, check them on? That's because they're already turned on the previous item in the backup. Back up these folders, and it will back up your desktop. It'll back up your documents library. It'll back up your pictures. Those are the default ones. Does not back up downloads.
No,
So
it shouldn't. It shouldn't.
It shouldn't, but I'm saying that most of the time I park a lot of things all over the place. I'll park things in downloads, I'll park things in documents, but because I usually whittle down the things that are in my download folder anyway.
I
This
see.
machine has hardly anything in downloads. I mean, I'll put something there and then it'll get deleted. But you can, once you turned off the backup mode, then you can see that everything is uncheckable and you can turn it all off. And then it can back up your personal vault wherever your personal vault is, but leave everything else alone, which is probably the better choice for most people. Yeah, you get a terabyte of storage when you have M365, but if it's going to be constantly moving stuff around, that's not going to help much either.
Yeah, personal vault I thought was supposed to be a secure storage area and encrypted. And the rest of it is plain text, so plain data. So you should be cognizant of that.
Yep.
Personally, I'm not a fan of cloud anything, so I have a local account and I have a user account, not just an administrator account. And I also back everything up locally and use external drives to do a reasonable facsimile of backup in case anything crashes.
Yeah, my idea of backup is, yes, I will use Google Drive for backup. It backs up my phone on a regular basis, so I know that that's done. My messages are getting backed up. The other thing that I have is I have a NAS drive, and my NAS drive is the target for most of my backups. So if I want to park something up somewhere, it's going to go on the NAS drive, and it's more than fast enough to handle any sort of local backups. But do I need I have a terabyte with the courtesy of M365 up on Microsoft. If I choose to want to put stuff up there, I can if I need to, but I really haven't. I was trying to work out a situation where how do I share a company file in QuickBooks between two different computers? And the thing I finally have decided to do was to create a folder on my G drive that's common between these two machines. When you do you work on your copy of QuickBooks. After you're done, it'll ask you to make a backup. You make a local backup, copy the backup file to a folder in the G drive. And then whenever you start and you know that somebody's been on the other machine, check the G drive and see if there's a newer thing than the last time you used. And if there is, drag it down and restore it. When you're done, put it back. So as long as the two machines are only used occasionally and they're not trying to do things at the same time, that'll work out pretty good.
Yeah.
And does not require QuickBooks Online.
So anyway, if you have to back up an entire system, I presume you do that locally.
Yes, I usually back them up to what I've done in the past is I've always had some sort of Western Digital drive, so I could always use the free Acronis with Western Digital, and that would do a full backup. It's kind of obnoxious on some of the interfaces on whether or not I want to do a full backup, not an incremental backup. Do the whole thing and ignore errors, because if there's even one tiny error somewheres, it doesn't make up the backup. So. Yeah.
Well, I have found that Macro and Reflect is quite reliable, at least for full backups, and other people find it good for the incremental backups they do. And I don't know anybody who does differential backups rather than incremental.
I would
But I'm
do.
sure-
I don't do any backups of my computers anymore.
Between
I back up my data, but Windows I don't care about. If it crashes, I just gotta start over again.
Yeah, so you don't do the whole system, and that's probably because you don't customize things and all that.
as far as incremental and differential, I'll take differential over incremental any day.
Mm-hmm.
Incremental means you got a separate file per backup that you do, say, in a month's time, assuming you only did a full backup once a month. And a differential, there's only one file, period.
Okay. Good point.
Yeah. The question is, if you have incremental, most backups have some scheme that they will use for incremental, that you get 5 incrementals before it decides to make a new backup. And then it will create a new backup and then start in the incrementals from then.
Well,
or if you do differential, you only need to do the differential, and it compares the backup that you made with what's on there now, and that's what your differential backup is.
Right. And as far as them not doing a incremental backup per file kind of deal, that must be something fairly new, because the last time I played with incremental, if I backed it up incrementally each day over the course of a month, I had like 30, 31 files that you would then blow away when you got your full backup.
I know that Windows would keep some files backed up, depended on the directory they were in, where it would make a copy of the file and keep it with the current operating system snapshot. And so you could do a right click on some files and say to recover previous versions. So if you see that option on recover previous versions, that's because that went as part of a snapshot and was held in that hidden file in the root directory.
Okay, with Windows today, they've moved that into file history.
Yes.
It used to be there were shadow copies.
Yeah.
Shadow copies and volume shadow copy was how many of the older programs worked. Whereas now they have to do things a bit differently. And one thing I should say about Macro and Reflect, they in this version, they changed their format for image archives. The X
does
or
it recover the old versions too then, or no?
Yes, it will. The X or 10 will work with the old style, and if it finds old style and it's like differential or a set, it will continue with the old style archive, but it will it will by default and by preference start in with the new style, which 8 and earlier will not read.
With you, if you do a backup and you need to restore to bare metal, does it support UEFI USB boot when it creates the USB image?
I believe it does. It did before. I think it
Okay.
should now.
All right.
I haven't done backups that self boot. I have used the USB backup and restore media,
Mhm.
the media you burn to USB. And by the way, if you do upgrade to X, you need to make new media.
Right.
Okay. I know that my new mini PC that I recently purchased does not support anything other than UEFI boot. Does not have any legacy option.
Oh, it's okay. These boot environments are WinRE, WinPE. That will do UEFI just fine.
Okay. Good.
And also, most of my Linux installers, my Ventoy drives, they don't mind UEFI. In fact, my Ventoy, I've tricked it out so that it's still, even with the new SBAT blacklist, does not mind secure boot.
Oh, cool. All right.
There's a trick to that, though, now that they did the blacklist.
Yes. Not for the faint of heart.
No, it's okay if you have a little bit of understanding of what the boot files are. And it doesn't take a lot of understanding, just enough to be able to copy something from someplace to someplace else. But you do need to know where to get it from and where to put it.
Okay.
So
All
that
right.
should be just fine. So all I'm saying is, yes, these boot media do just fine with UEFI boot,
Good.
with a little asterisk on most systems.
On most systems, yeah. I know that Acronis had a problem with some of their versions along the way with Win 10, that it had an issue with USB 3 external media. So, yeah, now that seems to be fixed, but I'm still wary when I try and test out a new backup. Like, okay, let's make sure it works under all these cases.
Now, question. Something was shared in chat. Does
That
somebody
was
want to say
that
what
was
it
that
was?
was me. That was me, and I was sharing this in advance.
Oh,
It's the presentation.
yeah. I'll shut up so you can do that.
Anyhow, this is not a long presentation, but it's a question, that I was trying to realize. Okay, in light of the fact that Windows 10 has on the chopping block in less than a year, I had to start thinking about what my next couple machines are going to look like. I mean, I like laptops, but there are times when a desktop needs the power and or other resources, and I don't need all of the pieces that I'm carrying around with a laptop, including a battery that likes to fail or something else that I can't change. It's inside of the unit, requires you to take it apart with many different kinds of tools. It wasn't worth the headache. So I said, let's look at the mini PCs. And as Bob has been using one for quite a while, I thought, well, it's probably safe to go near the water. Let's see what's out there. So I have to define mini PC or miniature PC is really a small low power desktop that's usually a really small form factor. And it's usually good for things like web browsing, document processing, media. They're usually quite small. Sometimes they can even mount on the monitor. It's not a thin client. Thin clients are what's been more popular in the past, not so much now, but you still see thin clients in things like doctors' offices where you don't want stuff stored on the local machine or not much stored on the local machine because it can be compromised. Instead, you want it kept secure on a server somewheres, and those do require a server to function. So I'm actually talking about mini PCs. And they can have the same CPUs and capacities as full-size desktop computers. And some of the processors can be quite powerful. They usually don't have much internal expansion. Sort of like an all-in-one. They may have extra memory. You might be able to swap out the M.2 SSD. You might have like a slot in there if you're for your graphics processor, and it might be on a separate card. But for the most part, they're pretty much packaged in that little tiny box. They do use less power because the adapter is smaller. But so do current laptops. If you look at laptops now, especially the AMD-based laptops, their power adapters are down to 45 watts. Sometimes you get warnings when you're using too much power on them that your laptop power supply, it will indicate like, oh, your power adapter is insufficient for what you're trying to do, which is kind of an interesting thing because that's what it was supplied with. But the mini PCs also have smaller power adapters in many cases. And you can mount them on the back of a monitor, and they may come with VESA mounting brackets. So the ranges of mini PCs, they're from small to large. They come down to N95s or smaller. N100 is the current crop of low-end chips that are out there. One I found on Amazon. I don't have any experience with this one directly. It looked like an interesting machine. If I needed a 16 gig, 512 gigabyte SSD, machine that is a quad core and is supported 4K displays and gigabit Ethernet, and also has Wi-Fi, not important, Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 4.2. You might notice those are a little like one generation behind the current ones. The nice thing about it is the N100 can have a total design power of 25 watts, which means it's not going to need a lot of power from the wall. It means this thing could run all day and you probably wouldn't even notice it on your bill. This one was currently about $189 at Amazon, and it probably has reasonable power, probably almost as powerful as some older desktops would be. Its passmark rating 5500 for a 4-core. That's not an i3. That's beyond i3 territory. Now this one's manufacturer was ZHULV. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it looks like Hulu with a Z. It does come with Windows 11 Pro. And for those that want to check the link out, they can go and look at a picture of it. But here's a picture of what it looks like. And if this is an eye chart, I know it does have a Type C. Sometimes the Type C is only used for power. Other times it actually can support Type C peripherals. The DC port is usually the power supply. On this one, I think it's a 12 volt 3 amp power supply. HDMI has a port here, or maybe it's got two HDMI 2.0 ports. The LAN is good to a gigabyte. Some of them are good to 2.5 gigabyte Ethernet. If there's versions of this that are out there that might be with smaller processors and memory that could be used as a router. So if you have the right software and you have open source router software and it just has a Gazinta and a Gazauta, that's all you need for a router. This would run perfectly fine to replace your router and at your home machine and be able to do more with it, more than likely, because the limit on a router is how fast the processor can take packets from one port to the other. So a switch is usually 2 or 3 orders of magnitude faster than a router. A router is usually much slower, but even the big routers were limited in the past to maybe hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of packets per second. That's a lot of data. But now when you have speeds of 2 and 3 gigabits per second over the air, you could have that many packets if they're smaller packets. Has Type C on here, has ports on the front and the back. Many of these, depending on the power dissipation, may have a fan. Some of them are fanless. This one, you can see the vents on here on the side. So it pulls in air on one side and blows it out. The other side or through the top. Okay. More powerful unit. This one is on sale, I think, for $299 right now. This one's up to a Ryzen 7. Let's go back here. Ryzen 7, and it can go up to 4.4 gigahertz with 8 cores, 16 threads, 16 gigabytes of RAM, terabyte SSD. You can get one for another $50 more that has 32 gigs of RAM if you want. They're DDR4 memory on these, not DDR5 yet. Has an 8-core AMD graphics 2000 megahertz chip, M2 SSD, NVMe. So, and it's got Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, has HDMI ports, display ports. It can actually have capability of holding a third monitor on USB if you want to have 3 monitors. It's similar to the N100 unit, except that this one has a display port and an HDMI port instead of 2 HDMI ports. With 8 cores and 16 threads, it's got some moxie to it. This one can use between 35 and 45 watts according to the advertisement page. However, if you go into the settings on the B-Link site, there's a way you can set this thing to crank up and use even more power for the processor to like overclock it. Also supplied with Win 11 Pro, although there's no stickers on the bottom that says here's what your serial number is. You can get it from them if you send them an email. This power adapter is a little bit different, 19 volts, 3.42 amps, real similar to an HP power pack capability, but with a smaller barrel connector. This one's pass mark is about 4 times the power of the N100 one. And at 21,000, it's a pretty good performer. I mean, it's not ultimate one. It's not going to be sitting there running AI, but it is enough to basically do most of the things you would want to do and have a Win 11 machine that didn't cost you an arm and a leg. I mean, to get ones that have more than this, you're spending probably 3 or 4 times the amount of money to get to that level. And here's what it looks like in terms of the pictures. It has ports on the front and the back. And power, there's a little tiny thing to reset the CMOS if you think you want to start over and start it again. This one only has 1 LAN port on it, but pretty much has what you need. Here's a comparison of the two in terms of processors, just in terms of raw processing power between the two. And you can see that an N100 can be run as low as 6 watts for its power dissipation, okay? And the Ryzen 7 is listed here as 45 watts, although if you're not using as much, it may use less power. All right, downside. Will support be an issue? Well, the manual that came with the B-Link is only 4 pages in English. The rest is 4 other languages or 6 other languages. The website in China does have drivers and BIOS images available. And if you go through the Chinese version versus the US version, it can point you to a different location which has some of the tutorials. So I found some other information in various places. I compare this to laptops with like a current 12th generation i5 on an HP 250 G9. That's pass mark rating is 13,000, 3,200 with 10 cores and 12 threads. And this thing, the B-Link, is maybe less than half the price of the HP. So, and the laptop power supply is 45 watts versus 65 watts for the mini PC. So they're in the same power range. Compared to some of the older machines that I've actually have running around here, my desktop i7 3770 is only 6,000 for a pass mark rating. ProDesk's i5 machines about 5,400 for running all the cores. i5 in the laptop that I use most of the time is only 2239, and the one I'm running right now, the i7 2720QM, is only rated at 3998, and it can run Zoom and everything else that I want to do at the same time. So I expect this machine to really hold up and be equivalent, much more equivalent than this machine is. I mean, it'll depend on what display I decide to choose, but now with Black Friday week coming up, I have my choice of displays. Another machine, I'll just bring it up. The current Asus Nook that's out there, you can find those on Amazon as well. It has an i5 1240p, which is a 12th generation i5, 12 core, 16 thread. This one's kind of different. The cores on this guy is got 4 performance cores, 8 efficient cores. So it's a little bit different. You don't have the same cores all over the place. The 4 performance cores can do anything. The 16 efficient cores, that's what's in the type of M100, is nothing but efficient cores. But they seem to work. I mean, a processor is a processor. This has got the Iris Xe graphics, and it has the Wi-Fi 6 and the Bluetooth 5.3. It's 0.1 more than the other machine had. Came with Windows 11 Pro, but you're also priced in at $600, so about twice the price if you want something a little more well-known. But this one also has Thunderbolt port and expansion port, so you could plug in an expansion dock and have more accessibility to it. I think that's what you use, right, Bob? The expansion dock?
No, I don't use an official expansion dock. If
Okay.
I want to use a dock, it'll be a Thunderbolt.
Okay. I mean, I've seen USB 3 expansion docks in the past too, that are usable. I mean, everything, as long as the USB doesn't lock up, you're fine using some of these expansion mechanisms. But if you need it, but these mostly have enough ports on them that, unless you need more, and I've seen some USB hubs that would extend this if you want to have less stuff plugging in and out of the unit. I use one that's on a 2-foot cable. It's a USB 3 hub. It is not a powered hub, but it can deliver 900 milliamps of power out of the USB-C connection or USB 3.2 connection. So that'll power most everything. It'll power one hard drive, or it'll power a whole bunch of stuff like mice, keyboard, and Wi-Fi adapters, and who knows what else. So, and maybe printer interface or whatever you want to plug in on USB. And for further reading, I found an article that piqued my interest when I looked at this. That was how I replaced my cheap Pi 5 PC with a no-name Amazon mini desktop. He used a real low-end machine that he got from China, but it's an experience if you want to read it. And also, you want to check out the definition of mini PCs on Wikipedia. And don't forget to donate. It's that time of year. This is what the V-Link looks like. And it's not huge. It's got lots of connectors on the back. I'll try and angle the light so you can see what's there. So those things at the top are actually vents. Okay. And it's got the one Ethernet. This little red thing on the bottom is not a pull tab that you're supposed to pull for your CMOS. It's supposed to be when you want to lift the cover up, and you took the 4 screws out in the corners, and you can pull it up for that. But they don't tell you that in the manual. And then the front, you can see the USB ports, the USB-C port, and there's a tiny pinhole on this side that is used for resetting the CMOS. Top, there's just little holes in that thing, and that's basically it. The power adapter is a 65-watt power adapter. It's like a USB fast charger for a phone, except it's on steroids. This one's a little bit bigger than a typical USB charger, and it comes with this cable and a barrel connector, which means it's not for USB. It's a 19.2 volt one. I almost want to toy with the idea of putting a different connector on one of my old HP power adapters and see if that would power this thing as well. Because 19.2 happens to be a very common laptop power supply. And have they done this before? Yes, they have. Some of the previous HP machines, one my accountant happens to use, I looked at it once and he was having problems with it. And I'm looking at this laptop or this desktop, and it looks really strange. Like I opened it up and there's just a small circuit board in there. And I said, this looks like a laptop power motherboard. And then I looked on the side and he had an HP external power pack that plugged in on the back, and that was loose. And that was what was causing him his problems. It was not fully seated into the unit. He was very happy to get that fixed. But basically, people have been putting laptops into desktop cases, and then that's a new kind of computer, right?
Yeah.
The nice thing about having the smaller power requirements, you can plug this thing into a UPS and expect it to run for some period of time, as opposed to a desktop. About the only thing it can do is shut down before power goes completely. So, any other questions?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say, Ed, about expansion port versus the expansion dock.
Uh-huh.
The dock is a Thunderbolt arrangement. The expansion port is a special port, which
Okay.
allows for a chassis to be added on.
Okay.
So it has different wiring entirely.
Okay. Well, it has both on that one. That particular NUC had both.
Yeah,
Yes,
those used to be an internal port.
Okay. You had your hand up, Harry. Go ahead.
What's your feeling about noise, how quiet it runs generally, and heat dissipation?
Well, that's why there's a huge fan inside of this unit. I mean, I've seen pictures inside of some of these things. Basically, it's mostly fan inside of there, between the Ryzen chip where it's mounted on the board and everything above it. So it's got a fan, and you can have there's options for controlling how fast the fan runs. You can make the fan run all the time. You can find some mini PCs that are fanless. Okay, but they're going to be more of the N100 type of machine, because they're going to need the 6. I mean, you have 6 watts in this size. You need to get that heat out of there. If you have 45 watts in there, there's 8 times the amount of power that's going in. You have to get it out of there. It turns into BTUs.
But the noise?
I haven't fired this up yet. I'm going to. Excuse me. I'm going to probably do it this weekend. I don't have a dedicated monitor to plug into it. I wanted it to not take a set on a smaller monitor that I plug in first, and then try and figure out how to get it to resize to the bigger monitor. It should do it automatically, but I've had problems in the past when I first configured the system with a different monitor and then moved to another monitor, and then, it's not happy. But I will do that and get an idea. The nice thing about this is you could put this behind the monitor. That cuts off some of the noise. Mounted vertically, doesn't care what orientation it's mounted in. But you could put this behind the monitor. And if you used a wireless keyboard and this was using your TV set for some of this, if you could, be that far away from it, or you have an 8-foot TV, you could plug this into that. And then, like I said, run from everything from across the room. But yeah. I know that laptops make noise too. Like this one, I have a PC cooler underneath this that runs all the time that's virtually silent. And it only kicks its main fan on when I'm compute bound. But it normally runs at least 60 degrees Celsius in this HP laptop. And I was concerned that when it would get up to 80, and when it's running something that, doing an update or something, and it's doing a lot of, using all the cores, that, that'd be nice, but hope it runs cooler. And at least this one, I could put another thing around it. I've even put a laptop cooler underneath my Comcast cable boxes. They actually give additional airflow to them while they're powered on, and I don't have to replace them too often either when I do that. Of course, you can also mount it properly where you put it on some sort of raised surface so there's more airflow underneath it. So all surfaces can help conduct heat.
Yeah, my NUC, which is one of the more powerful units in this class, I just set it on the desktop And yes, it will sometimes seem to be heating up quite a bit if I put it under a load, like if I'm doing a full virus scan or something like that. The fan can rev quite a lot, which is probably preserving the components.
Mhm.
I, but during a meeting, I might not want so much noise, and there are ways of controlling that. But again, it's at some risk of heating up.
Right. And then usually with the AMD processors, usually for the most part, they all run less power in terms of actual power needing to compute for the same compute job. They are always lighter weight. They have less instructions, but they have, faster clock speeds. So it's a trade-off there, but they usually run lower power dissipation. I mean, if I was doing the same thing in one of the other desktop Intel processors, I'd be looking at 110 watts for dissipation on the processor. I mean, at high-end gamer machines, there's something that tells you that maybe we're going the wrong direction when you have to have a 750 to 1 kilowatt power supply to run this desktop. Maybe the gamers really need it when they have to run 2 graphics cards that use as much as 5 laptops.
There are up to 1,500 watt power supplies for these gamers.
And if you're using 1500 watts, you're using most of that electric circuit in a common house. You only have 1800 to play with at 15 amps. So you don't have much. You better turn the lights low because you're going to be using your computer. And have I mean, if you have a monitor, I mean, the monitor uses some power. I mean, I don't know what the current wattage of a 32-inch curved monitor is, but I want to guess it's at least 60 to 100 watts. So you're going to be using that much power for the monitor as you do for your whole computer.
I'm just using
So,
22-inch monitors.
oh, those use less. They're about 30 watts. No see them. I have a fruit fly or something that's buzzing me here. Don't know where it came from, but it wasn't outside today. By the way, Bob, we got snow here today.
Yeah. Well, we finally got rain.
Yeah, I heard you got rain. Got too much, I think.
No, given how dry the soil is, except for the chance of runoff, but it was a fairly steady rain. So I don't think it's going to be running off too much. And
Then I
besides,
heard,
the reservoirs could use it.
yeah, I heard both coasts got nailed, except on the west coast, the east, the west coast they call it. Yes.
I think you're thinking a little south of us. We got
No,
about an inch.
the bomb cyclone that hit Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know about that.
And that's going to be around until middle of next week. Happy
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
And
Yeah.
people say there's no such thing as climate change. Yes. Keep telling yourself
Well,
that. Yes.
there have been other years where things have run dry and then wet. But anyway, getting back to computers, yeah. So the power requirements, yeah, they can be pretty considerable for some, even for some of these mini PCs. And getting back to the noise issue, yeah, the fans can be kind of noisy.
But again, you can control that depending on how much power you need for what kind of task you're trying to do. I wanted to make sure I had enough power to replace a desktop, and that desktop already has 3, what are there, 200 millimeter fans in it.
Mhm.
So if it kicks its fans on, which it rarely did, anything other than a light purr, you'd hear it go off. So my old i7 3770, when I had it cranked up doing some heavy duty graphics, then it would fire up those fans. And it would make noise. Yes, big fans make big noise. But like I said, like this laptop right now, if it's being lightly used, yes, it's maybe using 25% of the processor, but how many cores? It's not running the fan more than, hardly at all. But but like I said, the coolers I've used, I have the old Thermataki coolers, which at the time were probably the highest volume you could get for a 5-volt power supply. because they would basically plug in an extra USB port. And since I used several of those on some of my machines, I never had a problem with anything overheating. And like I said, if I put this in the spot where I have a monitor, I might just put a cooler underneath it just to make sure it has more air. More air is better than less air. But I just like the idea. And then for backup, I can plug in USB connection. I can plug in a hard drive. This is a USB 3.2, so I'm not sure what the power that can drive it. Can plug in probably any external hard drive I wish and use it for backups. And if you do need one with more than one Ethernet port and you want to play router games, like I said, they make versions of this with two Ethernet ports, which sort of sounds like they're trying to go into the same market that some of the QNAP products were in, because almost most of the QNAP servers I had ever seen always had two Ethernet ports, so you could balance the load that went into them. I didn't really need to run second port. I just used gigabit Ethernet everywhere, and that's what most of my wired network looks like here. I mean, I do have sections that are 100 based and 10 based, but those are isolated near the fringe on the out. I still run 10 megabit Ethernet for my old HP laser printer. That's happiest there. Any other questions? All silent. Any other questions for open forum that we may have missed? We may have monopolized some of the other things. Anybody had a question they wanted to ask and forgot?
Well, if you forgot, then you have no question.
Well, I know that, like I said, a lot of people have Win 10 machines that may be going under the knife and having to see if I can make this thing work on Windows 11, and then you're playing games until finally they don't support that anymore. And if you buy the brand new machines, you have the problems with the chipsets that don't work on some of the newest ones. So which pig in the poke do you choose? The newest chipset that might be broke, or one that's older that may no longer be supported when Windows 11 gets old? Because at some point in time, they're going to move that threshold from the 8th generation on up to maybe the 10th generation. I suggested a refurb machine to one gentleman. I'll have to go install his Windows 11 probably tomorrow, which turns out to be a 10th generation HP unit, also a small form factor. And he was surprised at the size, and I told him, yeah, it's probably more powerful, a lot more powerful than the one you had. Because I think that's got the i5 with the 10 cores in it, I think. Not bad machines. I mean, they're reasonable machines, but for what he needs to run. That was something else that came up that I noticed recently. Zoom no longer seems to want to play on Windows 7 anymore. What it'll do on a Win 7 machine is ask you to upgrade, and then it won't be able to upgrade, and then it's dead in the water.
Well, I've got one other old machine. Originally, it was running a 64-bit Zoom, but about 2 years ago, it stopped working, and I downloaded and tried out the 32-bit, and it works fine.
Well, this one was probably running, I'm not sure if the 64, probably was the 64-bit, and it was running the 5.9, and then he got a thing that said you have to upgrade, and it didn't realize you were on Win 7, but then it got into an upgrade loop where it could never get out of. So he no longer had Zoom capability on his old Win 7 machine. So that's figured. Anybody else who's trying to run Win 7, be warned that it looks like they're moving past Win 7 support. They threatened to do it in the past. Now they're actually carrying it out. So I assume that means Win 8 as well. If you're going to go to Win 7, you're getting rid of Win 8 as well.
Right.
Okay. And for those that wanted a copy of the presentation, it's in the chat. All you have to do is pull it down. Now, what am I going to add to this thing before I turn this thing loose? Well, I was looking at some 23-inch plus monitors. There's some bevel edge monitors that look like they're reasonably nice, low power. I'm not sure how bright they are because I still have some old Acer 233 monitors that I've used, 22-inch. They have a fairly high contrast ratio and they're pretty easy to look at. They're like 45,000 to 1 or something like that. I'm not sure if the newer ones that are, maybe they're easier on the eyes, they have lower contrast, but some of the HP ones that are out there look, well, I may try that. Depends on whether I can get it into the section of the roll top desk that I have some of my other stuff in. I have 14 inches to play with. So if I don't mount it on the stand, or I can slide it down on its whatever stand it comes with, I'll see if that works. But I've noticed that many of the lower end monitors only come with one port on them, an HDMI. They don't have the VGA port, and I certainly didn't see very many the digital ports that used to be available, the white plug.
You mean they don't have the DVI or mini DVI?
I know that nothing. I didn't see much of that at all. I mean, the one that I have. I think they both have 3 ports. They have the HDMI, the DVI, and the VGA. So, and then you can flip between them and have them plugged into more than one computer if you want.
Mm-hmm.
The one I think that has my oldest one is still plugged into an old Win XP machine that I've had for a number of years. I used to keep it around for some video editing, but it also uses the HDMI port that goes over to the QNAP server. So when I fire up the QNAP server, it takes precedence and then shows its boot sequence. And I say, yeah, are you happy? And I can look over it and yes, it's happy. Yeah. All right, Harry. See ya. Any other things that I may, if I put it together, there's no meeting next month, but maybe in January I can give you a follow-up on how this works and if there's any issues I found with it and where I found support. And I could go ahead and add a follow-up to this. Did somebody raise their hand? I missed it? No. Okay. Or any other suggestions for topics that you'd be looking for? So Dennis, you're going to go out and get one of these things so you can replace your laptops?
No, I don't think so. Not yet.
Not yet. Well, remember, you got until probably October of next year.
Okay.
But with the prices coming down, some of these are knocked down 25%. So keep your eyes open if you're thinking about doing one of these things. Black Friday times, they can, like I said, they can knock the prices down. I'm considering, like I said, using some of these things to replace full-fledged desktops at my church because they need to replace their machines. They're on Win 7 and Win 10. I'll keep the old machine for access to things that still require Internet Explorer access, like the security video feeds that will only play with Windows, with Internet Explorer for some reason. Yeah, it's a 9-year-old system, and they no longer support that image. So, yeah, I'd have to update the NVR, and that's money we don't need to spend if it's still working.
Let me ask you a question. I got this machine converted to Linux, and I'm using an old Acer monitor on it. But as far as the camera, You
Yeah.
know, I just picked up this little camera, and I don't
Uh-huh.
know much about them, but I need to use it on the Linux machine. I don't have anything built in. It's using a small form factor.
Okay.
So, what kind of spec should I look for on a camera? And I'll tell you, I'm not just looking for a camera that I'll sit there to take my picture like here. I'm looking for one that I can actually point it at text or at another screen and for people to see. And I find this is way not capable enough. What kind of specs are there on these portable cameras, or what should I look for? Usually, when I saw these older things, they don't tell much on the way of a spec on there.
Well, about the only thing you're going to find is maybe its resolution and what its focal length might be to give you an idea of what kind of camera it is. If you want a camera for close ups, are you trying to scan images with it for some
No,
reason?
no, I'd like to be able to point at something on a computer screen, on another computer screen with it, or read text with it. Not really taking pictures or scanning, just to be able to, like in a Zoom meeting right here, I like to be able to take that camera and point it at something I'm trying to show somebody, a setting I'm trying to do on another computer, just so they can see it. And I just need a better resolution.
Well, you know what my suggestion would be? If I'm in a Zoom session and I want to show somebody a screen, I use one of these things, hook it up to the Zoom session, and let it take the picture of the screen and show it in a shared Zoom session.
Oh, but
Because these
that,
cameras, these cameras are a lot better than what you had in your hand there.
Right.
it's not, that can't do a video though. That just takes
Sure it
pictures.
can.
Sure.
It
Oh,
can. You
what?
can do Zoom video on a phone.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can do anything you do on a laptop, on a tablet, or on a phone. So if you have a tablet, like a Kindle or something like that, they can fire up Zoom as well.
Huh.
And you can aim that at whatever you, it's a little bit different on how to turn on the video. You have to look around like, oh, there's how I turn on the video and figure out which camera you're going to use, whether it's this camera or this camera. But remember, you're sitting with a 40 megapixel, whereas that other thing in your hand is maybe 2.5.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So
trying to
if you want the resolution before it starts to shrink it down for Zoom, then it's there. Okay.
Hmm.
And if you take like an image, take a picture, and then share it from your Google Photos, here's a picture of it. Oh wow, I can see that. Because I've been surprised at what the capabilities of the Android phone are. Putting up, having the picture taken. I've taken picture of a document written in 1853, and it recognized the cursive handwriting. Because I didn't understand what word it is, and I did Google scan. Let's try Google scan. Oh, that's a word. Here's the definition of that word. It means a type of indebtedness. But yeah, you got something right there in your pocket that may work a lot better than trying to search for something. You can find other cameras. You have to find the right drivers for them if Linux doesn't recognize it. But there are hand scanners that can do that if you're looking specifically to take text. But if you're trying to take a picture of something you're moving around with, like a screen or something, or take a screenshot, I mean, if you can't do a screenshot on your computer, the next best thing is your phone.
Yeah, more
You
more
have to
video,
realize
more
when
video rather than a picture. Just
video too, and they'll take video. The one
live
thing you may have
live
an
video.
issue with on the video would be if you see the sync bars on the screen, depending on what your refresh rate is on your screen versus how fast the video is being taken with your camera. Because sometimes you'll see interference patterns. The other place you get the interference patterns is if you use a phone to take a picture of something under a fluorescent light with fluorescent tubes. You'll see the AC hum bars that are in the screen because the bulb is going on and off at 60 hertz. You can see that in a video on your phone. So you'll see bars that go across it. You have to use something like an LED light or an incandescent light that gets rid of that. But you got something right there in your pocket that'll probably work better than any of the other things you were looking at. And if it's connected to your G drive or photos or something, you can take a video and you can share the video, or you can do a Zoom, and Zoom will let you send video too. Some people have an issue trying to do Zoom with a phone, and they really haven't explored all of the options that are going back and forth. Oh, go to that screen. Oh, that's right. Mute my microphone. Okay, now that's where I end my session. There's where I turn on the video. Oh, it's going to ask me, do you want the Zoom to share your video? Yes, go allow. Oh, there it is, doing video now. It's about all. You just have to give it the right permissions, and it'll go ahead and do what it needs to do. And that's probably the easiest way if you're already doing a Zoom session with somebody to show them something. That's, here, I'll take a picture of it with my phone and you'll see it right away. Just make sure you don't have the volume up, or you can mute the volume, or you mute the laptop's microphone, because Zoom on a phone typically runs the speaker all the time.
Okay.
In fact, it'll unmute your speaker to play the sound through it. So you may need to mute your microphone so you don't have feedback. But you should be fine with that. You'll experiment with it and you'll figure it out. Any other questions? Yes, Bert.
They did announce at Ignite this week that Microsoft's coming out with a box that will just be tinier than a NUC, but it'll be Windows only. You don't have any data on your own machine. It's just going to play in the cloud for
I
your whole
saw
system.
that. It was an M365 mini PC. I was going to bring that and put it in my part of my presentation, but it slipped. It came in at the last moment. And I said, it might be nice, but
well, it's a cloud PC.
Yeah, it's a cloud PC.
I do have an app on my iPhone that is already set up for that, if there were any devices that I had to use it. So basically, it's sort of like the old, what we call it before,
thin client.
Office.
It's a thin client. It works in the cloud.
Yeah. So it's the same kind of thing, because there's no data locally. It's all in the cloud, and your whole system is in the cloud. So you don't have to do anything except plug it in and plug it into a monitor. So
Yeah.
they didn't show how many ports it had.
No, it didn't show anything about it at all. I did notice one thing that had recently demised that I was kind of, let's see, the Microsoft Store? No, that wasn't it. That was a Surface laptop. There was a thing that I saw recently. I was trying to reference some stuff off of one of the websites that I was frequently getting updates with. It was called Code Project. I don't know if any of the rest of you have subscribed to Code Project, because they usually had code samples and also things that people were supporting. They have gone belly up, basically, and they're looking for somebody to take over some of their stuff, so their website isn't working so well. Kind of a shame, because I was looking for some stuff. I think it was referencing Perplexity, and I was trying to look for the article that showed me that, and I tried everything I clicked on, and it said, oh snap, I guess that's the website. Did they go away? Oh yes, there's an email that says we're going away. Drat, I missed that one. See if I can find that other one that I had. It was talking about the thing we were talking about, the Microsoft announcement. I don't know if I have it here. It's too far down. It had to be relatively soon. Let's go all the way up. No.
They didn't say much about it. It's more.
Yeah, I know.
It was this 4 days.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when I saw it, but I had pulled it up and I said, oh, that's interesting. But, it was
They talked about it coming out in April.
Yeah, I did not see when it was supposed to be released, but I did notice and like, oh, a mini PC. How did it know I was talking about it tonight?
They said it was April when it would come out, but that's just a guess, I'm sure.
Yeah. The other thing I've noticed that hasn't been working so well lately for me is some of my Wemo devices. They say they're still supporting it, but I have some of my Wemo devices that would fall off and I'd have to manually reset them. And I thought, oh, that's disturbing. So I started trying to see if there was any other, electric switches, something with Black Friday coming up. Maybe it was some 5 gigahertz versions that may or may not have supported Matter. That sounded interesting as well, because Matter is the newer form of IoT that people are subscribing to. I found some that did do 5 gigahertz that were on sale with Amazon, but not too many of them will support that. Most of them are all 2.5, 2.5 gig or 2.4 gigahertz only. So yeah, there's too much pollution on the 2.4 band around here. I'm sure that I'm doing is getting interference from somebody 100 feet away, but they got their router cranked to max, so it's probably blasting in here and interfering with some of my machines. They only have to go 30 feet or something to reach an access point, but that seems to be a problem for some of them. But they have a tendency to fall offline, at least with the Wemo app. They're not accessible. I haven't tried to see if I can go and use a command window and try and ping the devices and see if they respond to ping. If they don't respond to ping, they're offline. But if they're pingable and they're not available on Wemo, that means they're not communicating with the Wemo server. Different problem. So, and I've toyed with the idea, should I download all of the source, which I did years ago, and see whether or not I should try and re-engineer it, make it a little more robust? It's a thought. I do have I have a blink camera that's in the basement that I aim at 4 have-a-heart traps. And the reason I do that is so I know that I don't have to go downstairs and check the traps if I have a little furry friend that has come to visit. Well, it helps if I can see them with the infrared, but not as well because it's positioned about 7 feet away from the traps. So you can't quite resolve it. But I put one of my Wemo devices down there and it turns on an LED lamp and now I can see them in living color. It's like, okay, I got 2 out of the 4 traps are triggered and there I can see their beady little eyes in there. Yeah. You can see their beady eyes better in infrared than with the regular light, but you can see them moving back and forth in the trap better that way. Oh, he turned on the light. He's coming to get us. Yeah, and then I have to go and take them out and relocate them outside in the cold and wet snow somewhere away from the foundation so they can't get back in again. And do I know if they're coming back in, if it's the same one coming back in again each time? I have low-tech answer. Sharpie, when their tail sticks out of the trap, put a couple marks on his tail. If that guy comes back with marks on his tail, he gets a longer trip before he gets let go.
Talking about mice, Ed?
Yeah.
Mice you're talking about?
Mice, yes.
Yeah,
Deer mice. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, we know. Oh, yeah.
Well, I have gotten a chipmunk or 2 in the basement.
Really?
And they sneak in every once in a while. They go through the drain tile. If there's no water in the sump pump, they'll go down outside and they'll come through the drain tile and they'll boop, boop, boop.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I want to relocate them, and I also have a trap set in the garage. If I leave the garage door open too long, and that's where my supply of sunflower seeds is, somebody will run in there and get caught in the trap, and I'll say, "Yeah, see, I told you shouldn't have come in here." Take them out to the back 40.
The chipmunks like to be under the sidewalk. They got their little, their place.
Oh, I have
their house or whatever.
I have lots of chipmunks and I have lots of squirrels. Yes, we have about
squirrels.
10 10 squirrels that are here on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah.
I have 4 black ones and 5 gray ones and an occasional fox squirrel.
Well, where I
Right.
live, I don't think you'd have. I don't think you might want to be trying to do catch and release because some of our mice are actually rats.
Really?
Yeah, I don't have. I would rarely even think about getting rats. All of the mice that we collect here
Yeah.
are deer mice.
Yeah, you're out in the countryside,
Yeah,
but where I live, we're basically a city,
yeah,
and so you do have your occasional rat showing up.
yeah. This is a picture outside my window.
Oh, there's one of your little friends.
Yeah,
Several of them.
3 black ones and 2 gray ones. Actually, they are all the same kind of squirrel. Because
Yep.
gray squirrels, black squirrels, and white squirrels are all black and white squirrels. They're termed black and white. Um, and sometimes their undersides are white on the gray squirrels. You notice that.
Yeah.
But I guess downstate Illinois, they have actual white squirrels.
Yeah, there's a population of them.
Yeah. That's not the one. I want to go back one. There's the other ones that weren't in that picture.
Oh,
They were there. They just weren't all in the same picture. 2 different windows. Yeah.
It's fun to watch them run along the telephone wires. You know how they go. Through the neighborhood on the telephone wires. Amazing.
They don't run through my telephone wires unless they're running underground.
Oh wow, we have.
And then there are woodchucks. Yeah, woodchucks are ground squirrels. Believe it or not, they're a type of squirrel.
Yep.
But yeah, the chipmunks will come up when they're right now they're hibernating when it got cold. They'll come back out in January for a short period, and then they'll go away again. But they will actually come up and take seeds and stuff out of my hand. So
Really? Wow.
yeah, I got them to the point where I can actually pet them, rub their back, rub them behind their neck, rub them by their tail. They like to be scratched there because they can't quite reach it themselves with their own feet. So they'll sit there and like, oh, you got the spot. While they're shoveling in seeds usually because they said, oh, look, he brought us sunflower seeds. Oh, we love sunflower seeds. That's the difference between squirrels and chipmunks. Chipmunks, they just vacuum everything and take it all with them. The squirrels eat the seeds and leave the shells all over the place.
Well, my daughter gets deer in her backyard. I don't. You get deer?
I've had deer on my covered front porch and eating the euonymus off the side of the house. When I used to bring deer chow out for them, I go into the garage, get the bucket with the deer chow, and I said, "Come on, let's go." And they would follow me around the house to the backyard, and I would pour it out on a plastic lid for a one of those 5-gallon containers, and they'd rush up and get it as I walked away. And I would see different groups come through at night. There would be each pod would come through, like 3 or 4 deer in it, and they'd munch on stuff and then move on. And then the next group would come through and munch on it and move on. We got yotes here too. Coyotes show up every once in a while. I've had one that insisted on wanting to eat pears that fell off of one of our trees while I'm mowing the lawn 15 feet away from him on a riding lawnmower. He was hungry. He was a mangy looking thing, but yeah, he was hungry. But we get them running through about this time of year. You'll see them all of a sudden like, oh, what's that dog doing out there? That's no dog. That's a coyote. That's a big yote. Yes, that's a healthy one. You can tell. He's not thin at all. Yes. So
yeah, around here we get hybrids that are part red wolf, and some of them are part dog, and they're like 3 feet at the shoulder.
Coyote dogs are actually quite intelligent. My mother had a friend who had a coyote dog, and hybrid, and it was a pet. But you know how dogs will take on a leash and they'll go wind themselves around a pole or something, get stuck there?
Yeah.
This dog would wind it up, but then he would unwind it.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, they got some smarts. Yes. So they've lost some of that smarts when they got domesticated.
Hey, Bob, when you say 3 feet at the shoulder, you mean
3 feet tall at the shoulder. That's because they're part wolf.
God?
No, well, some of our coyotes are pretty close to that. They may be 2.5 feet at the shoulder
Yeah.
on the larger ones, but they're a size of a large husky small malamute size.
Yeah, ours are about the size of a Labrador.
But yeah, they wander through. You can hear them when they're in the spring when they get a hold of a rabbit, or something like that. And they're all yap 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 yap. I mean, I've taken my mice out to dump them out, and in the next yard over, there's a bunch of coyotes yapping. So
Yeah.
not far at all.
The other thing we have around here are wild turkeys.
We have had some turkeys as well. The turkeys have the one place I've seen a turkey, the strangest one in Illinois, was back in 2007. I was dropping my daughter off at the airport. She was going to Australia for the first time. And there was a rabbit in the parking garage at O'Hare. It was just kind of weird to see that. And then driving back as I'm leaving O'Hare and going on the exit ramp to Manheim Road, in the middle of the median is a wild turkey. Wild turkey in the area of Chicago. Yes.
Wow.
But north of here, up in Lake Geneva, they have flocks of wild turkeys all over. You can see them all the time. We have sandhill cranes. They will come up occasionally. They come in my yard. Last year I had them all the time. They'd come here every other day, and I would hand feed them peanuts, and they would put my hand out, and they were eating peanuts out of my hand. But yeah, if they love peanuts, if you get them, you got to break them up into pieces, and you throw them in pieces like, oh, he's got peanuts. Oh, we got to have more. So we do Meals on Wheels once a month, and there's a family north of here in North Barrington in Biltmore area that we went up there, and they had 4 sandhill cranes in their front yard, and I happened to have peanuts in my pocket, and I threw some peanuts to them, and they loved it. But those are big birds. They are tall. Those are 4 feet tall birds. And you look at them like, that's a big bird. And you look at this beak. This beak is like that long. Like, whoa. And the air holes. This thing that struck me the most amazing on them is looking at this thing that's like 2.5 feet away from me. I'm looking through the one air hole, through the other air hole at the ground behind it. Like the holes were big enough, you could actually focus. You could see the ground through them. Like, it's a big air hole there, bird.
Ed, when you go to Brookfield Zoo, I hope you're able to restrain yourself from feeding the animals according to the signs.
Brookfield Zoo was the first place. I grew up in Elmhurst. We did not have chipmunks in Elmhurst. But when I went to Brookfield Zoo, I was amazed at the chipmunks that were there and just running all over the place. And they would almost come up to you out there, and I thought that would be kind of neat. Now I'm living here, and we have chipmunks all over the place, and the people, my neighbors complain about some of the chipmunks making holes underneath their, sidewalks and making the sidewalk settle. Well, you jack up the sidewalk, you throw a whole bunch of pea gravel underneath there, and then they can try and take that away. But it'll take them a while. It works. They tolerate it. They let them go underneath the sidewalk. They don't do that much. Yeah.
Go to York High School, Ed, or no? Did you go to
Pardon?
York High School in Elmhurst?
Yes, I did. Not in Elmhurst. I went to Villa Park. I went to Willowbrook.
Oh, yeah.
But my wife did as well. Half of my brothers went to York. The other half went to Willowbrook.
That's right.
We were on the border between York and Willowbrook, and that border moved back and forth. So my parents' house used to be across the street from where Edward Elmhurst Hospital moved to.
Yeah.
So on Euclid, we were right across from the parking lot. Well, it wasn't there when I was there. It was there after my mom moved into a nursing home. And that house was one of the few that didn't get purchased for this property for the hospital. Instead, we sold it to Timothy Christian. So they bought it, flattened it, and put it in a parking lot. They tore down Paradise and put it in a parking lot.
The old log Chevrolet, remember? Yeah.
I remember the Solozzi Edelson Chevrolet.
Oh, well,
Long
yeah.
was on the other end of Elmhurst.
Yeah.
Long was up on 20 Lake Street.
Okay. Yeah, Slow
Yeah.
Edison, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, Solozzi Edelson. Yes, they did not appreciate us riding bicycles through their lot. Did not appreciate that at all. But I would like to know if they ever found some of the stuff my mom buried in the backyard, though. We had acquired a surplus piece of former military gear. The nose cone from a Minuteman I missile. With the electronics, but not with the solid state disc. Or the spinning disc, not solid state. It had the electronics, but it did not have the disc inside of it. And it was made out of a magnesium aluminum alloy. Magdalum? Yeah. It's buried. It was buried somewhere in my mom wanted to raise the soil up, so she buried stuff. Garbage, everything. It got buried, so it would raise the soil up because they were quite low. Technically, it was a floodplain. And I hate to tell Edward Elmer's Hospital they're built on a floodplain, but they did for Salt Creek. That's technically floodplain for Salt Creek.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You remember the old Aurora and Elgin Railroad, or was that before you?
Aurora Elgin, that's near me right now. That's the Canadian Pacific now. Elgin, no, you're talking Evanston Elgin Railroad. Aurora Elgin was the other tracks, which
like
became
Spring Road and Bullet. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Prairie Path.
Yeah, Prairie Path. Yeah.
Yeah, that turned into the Prairie Path. That turned into the Prairie Path while I was living down there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right there, Bullet and the Prairie Path. Yeah.
Yeah, I left home about 50 years ago, so I've been up in the Barrington area since.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But my parents still stayed there, and we sold the house less than 5 years ago. But I used to have to go down there and maintain it. So, yes, that's one of the things that you do as a son. So you have to take care of stuff. So, and because I was the trustee of the state, I had to do that kind of stuff. Do what you need to do. So
that's one of the tough things, though. You got to take care of your parents and take care of your kids. You know, it's life as it's.
One or the other.
Well, both. Yeah, both.
Yeah, or sometimes both. Yeah.
Both. Oh, yeah.
Well, at least all my kids are still in the area or in an area reasonably close by. I hope not too many people are in Chicago get hit with this new cloud computing tax that they're proposing.
What?
Have you heard that one?
No.
Yes, illustrious mayor of Chicago wants to tax the people using cloud computing for remote work.
Oh.
So if you have employees that live in Chicago, you're subject to a tax on the cloud computing resources you're using.
Sounds like Elon Musk.
No, it's not Elon. This is your regular mayor doing this, looking to cover that 300 million shortfall in his budget.
Yeah.
He might get it from somewhere, but that'll just have a tendency to move people out of the city of Chicago and make sure all their employees are outside, and then they don't have to pay it. I don't know. $300 a person a head or something like that. I think they were figuring, and it's actually a percentage, and they were trying to do a what was it, 11 or 12% tax? Yeah. So they're already taxing other things. Yeah, it was a type of sales tax on a service. on a cloud computing resource. So, yeah. It'll be interesting to see how he figures out how to collect it. But it was specifically for the people doing remote work, I think, is what they were looking, that kind of stuff.
Do you mean like using a VPN? They use a VPN? What do you mean by?
Well, remote work, either doing Zoom sessions or you're logging into your mainframe at work or something like that. And if you're a Chicago resident and your company has to pay for that service, then they want to tax that service and make revenue for the city of Chicago. How would they know you're doing it? How would they collect it? Don't know. But that's like head taxes in general are hard to collect anyway, unless they have some way to figure out if you're doing it. Oh, that was something else I was going to bring up. How many of you have ever heard of accessing the cameras that are in place at most intersections?
I'd like to.
In Lake County, it's called passages.lakecounty.org, and the map will actually show you cameras, and you can actually see photographs and some videos of actual cameras at different locations.
What's the website again?
Passages.lakecounty.org.
I have some of that right on my Comcast. It shows up in Edge.
How about Cook County?
Yeah, it will. I mean, that's probably where you see it, but that's where they're getting the information.
How about Cook County?
I don't know about Cook. I just know that I saw Lake County. I'm sure there's other ones.
Some of the primary routes also show the cameras on Google Maps.
You can if it shows you the right thing, but I don't know how you get the access to them. Okay.
On Google Maps, if you can see it, you can point at it, and you can usually pop it up.
Yeah. I know that not all of them are working right now in my area. Yes. There's Lake Zurich. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah, I had to drive out to Elgin today, Department of Motor Vehicle, to transfer a car title because they won't do it in Schaumburg. They don't do it at the Schaumburg office. It would have been nice to see the roads today.
They would have done it in Lake Zurich if that was open, because that's supposed to be one of the new ones now.
I'm a little closer to Elgin than Lake Zurich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's ones you can see, US 12 and Ela Road. And there's the other one that's farther up, US 12 and 22. And it periodically updates it. I think there's a timestamp in the corner that says at 9:03, so that was 5 minutes ago. Interesting. I just happened, and then you can look at some of the ones that are, they show you the cameras on the pass, at least on the passage side, it helps you find where all the cameras are located. I mean, I've seen other things, though, that are out there that are mounted with a solar panel and a camera of some sort at certain intersections, and those are license plate readers. I haven't figured out how to access that information yet. But I've seen those all over the place. Like, what is that? And I looked up and I, Google Lens search, and yeah, that's a license plate reader. So they capture a lot more information. You thought that you were all safe, but all right. Well, I will send out a reminder that there's no meeting in December. So you're not trying to look for a Zoom session in December, but we'll be meeting in January. And I'll figure out something to show by then, I hope. And if you guys got any accesses, any ideas or what you want to see, go ahead and send me an email. Got my Zoom invite, so it's usually my email somewhere's in there. If not, you'll find it. Okay, you want to shut down the